punk, rock, and beyond. DJ Spike Polite here with film historian Mike Bowen as we discuss the last concert by GG Allin. Coming on today's broadcast. All right, Mike, welcome to
I'm glad to be here,
show.
Spike.
It's great to have you here, man. So it's pretty interesting writing this book you have about GG Allin and you know what things that people didn't know, aside from the throwing the fecal material and the rolling around and getting arrested and blowing people up if he could. But yeah, it's the final show. You know, you've been collecting evidence on it. Tell me what you think so far.
Yeah, as you said, I'm a film historian. That's my background, what I've been doing for some decades now. But I met GG in the early 80s. I'm from New Hampshire, like GG was. And I met him.
That's cool.
Yeah. In fact, an unknown fact, my father lives basically next door to the hospital where GG was born in Lancaster, New Hampshire, way up northern New Hampshire. And I'm up there all the time. I met GG briefly and wrote an article about him very early in 1982. I was like 18 years old and, listened to the mighty punk rock music and all that stuff. Later years, I got much more involved in studying cinema history, particularly here in New York, so-called exploitation movies, sex movies, porno in the 70s, that stuff. Actually doing that in an academic setting, which has been interesting. But a few years ago, somebody contacted me about this article I wrote about GG, which might have been the first kind of comprehensive description of a GG Allin show. It was in the zine my friends and I were making. And I realized there was much to be said about GG and a lot of research that needed to be done. So I've been reaching out to people like crazy the past couple of years. I've interviewed over 180 people at this point who had some GG experience, some of them a lot, some of them just one story, but they're good stories. And that led me to put together this book. And as you said, one of the most significant gigs GG ever played was this show at the gas station in the summer of 1993. And it was his last show. And because he died later that night after the show, but also it was a very unusual show. And I've been lucky enough to find quite a number of people, including you, Spike, who were there. In fact, you were not only there, your band was playing that night. So it's become a kind of one of the cornerstones of this project because I have a lot of great feedback about it. And to me, there's a mystery around that show that, I'm trying to figure out. And also, people may be aware, but there's great video footage, both of the show and of the aftermath. When GG left the venue called the gas station and was wandering around in the Lower East Side. Anybody who wants to go on YouTube can sort of see a document of that afternoon. And I'm lucky enough now to know a lot more about what people experienced when they were there.
Yeah, so as far as I could see, that day was very hot out there. It was just, just sweltering summer. GG Allin was there, wanted to do a sound check on some equipment for a video that he was intending to use as part of the movie. And it was so hot, nobody wanted to really be there. And people were telling him, why don't you go use your own equipment and go poop and break that stuff? Did you hear anything about that?
Well, your band, I think, might have been one of the bands that was involved with this. The Murder Junkies, GG's band at the time, frequently used other people's equipment when they were touring because of the difficulty of hauling around all their own stuff. And my understanding is that, at least for the sound check, they needed to use somebody's equipment. And was it your band that was set up? Is that correct?
Yeah, we had set up, and we had the intention of just getting in there and getting out before anything was broken, before the cops would come. And yeah, we just wanted to make sure everything would be all right for us to get to play another show.
Yeah, it sounds like you had some idea of you knew something about Gigi's reputation. Then, if you were worried about your equipment getting messed with, yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely what's going to happen, especially guitar distortion pedals that can get peed on. You know?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And you were in that neighborhood at the time. You want to say a little bit about what the gas station was like? I'm just a guy asking people about it, but I was never there. What was it like?
I think the neighborhood at the time, a lot of the people living in there were Hispanic and a few old time Irish and Polish people. The Irish and Polish people had kept the punk rock scene with the Misfits and all that at like some Ukrainian hall at Club 57.
Uh-huh.
So they had kept the punk rock going earlier. And now it was just people like us, and then the area had been having an epidemic of heroin and cocaine users. It's pretty run down. The prices were low, yet it created a state where people would live there cheaply and afford to do their art and still pay their rent by supporting themselves with the art. And a lot of people would come from out of town to see these artists, and who are struggling artists, and still making it. Basically, was my band HumYn SeWage got its start there too, to living that same life until too many people came down to see the artist, that the prices went up and it forced everybody else out.
Gentrification.
Yeah.
And this is just for people who don't know, the Lower East Side of New York. And this would have been in the early 90s. And I think you gave a wonderful description of what the area was like and how it was a mixture of drugs and poverty, but also lots of artists, musicians, and all these creative influences as well. And the gas station, if I'm not mistaken, was really a kind of an art space, wasn't it, Spike?
Yeah, that was a guy named Lionel who ran it, and he was a welder. So he would weld pieces of metal together to make structural kind of art out
These
of
big,
metal.
crazy kind of sculptures made out of like metal junk, right? Like old bicycles and stuff.
Yeah, I would see some of it. Also, they had another place down the road of similar stuff they used on a TV show called NYPD Blue.
Huh.
But Lionel's was in a lot of movies too over there.
Okay. And then at some point, they started to put on shows there, concerts, music shows. And for people who don't know, the venue was called the gas station, at least colloquially. It was also called Space 2B, I'm pretty sure, from what I've seen, because it was on the corner of Avenue B and East 2nd Street. But it came to be known as the gas station because it was literally an old abandoned gas station. So what the artist who took it over did was kind of build a fence around the area where you would have pulled in, right, to where the gas pumps were. Those were gone. And they created this big fence and created kind of a yard, made a big yard with this big, crazy fence around it. And then the gas station itself hadn't really been altered in any way. It was literally like if you took, an old gas station where, they had one or two doors where you drive your car in and they'd put it up on a lift to check your brakes or something. It was just an empty space that used to be a gas station like that, with sort of an office off to the side. And it was being used for shows. I've heard there were some spoken word things there. Maybe you know about that, Spike, but punk shows also, right?
Yeah, it was good with a lot of the, I think even the Casualties and some oi bands, Red Alert or something. They had played over there, and I guess Lionel and all them were comfortable with allowing their space, and it was a start of art galleries having other types of art at their place to keep the
Pay
rent
the bills
paid.
probably.
Yeah,
Yeah.
kind of like they have pop-up galleries and things now, so people rent out their spaces so they can come back and make sure they pay that bills.
Did you ever see like an art show in that space, Spike, or notice something like that outside of a music, performance?
I think Lionel's was a good start for all of this were the art and music. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm sure it existed before, but to my knowledge, it was a good start.
I was lucky enough to interview a guy who knew the guy who um, first took that space over and turned it into an art space. He was a Spanish guy from Spain, and without getting into all the details, he created it completely as an art space. I think the music only came in there a little bit later. But one fun thing that he told me, and I've seen other people comment on this, is when the space was operating, and there was almost nothing in it, right? It was sort of like an empty space, basically. But you could go in there, there'd be a dude in there who had like a cooler, and they made these watermelon drinks, like watermelon juice drinks. And if you wanted them to put some vodka in it, they'd ask you if you wanted it with gas. It was like the little code, right? So they were running like a little cagey bar on the side. We could go in and get your watermelon with gas.
Wow.
But it obviously became a well-known landmark in that neighborhood, right? And sounds like it was a cultural center for people who are more into the art scene. But as you said, I've also been told that a lot of those blocks in the area were more or less controlled by different drug dealers. This is something you probably know about, and they kind of ruled the neighborhood.
Right on that block, there was a drug spot, a heroin spot. Yeah, it was attracting the people from the tri-state area who would want to come down and party on the weekends, and then they were the outside income that the drug sellers needed.
Yep. So you had all kinds of people from outside coming in, and also, to my knowledge, a number of people in the neighborhood developed drug habits, and there was that issue as well. In fact, that plays a role in the story because Gigi would die the night after that performance, which happened in the afternoon, of a heroin overdose, despite the fact that he was not a habitual heroin user. He was not a junkie at all. But he was in the company of people who did have that problem, and he decided to sit down and share drugs with them, and it just exceeded his capacity, shall we say. I shouldn't be laughing, but I mean, it's sort of such a tragic joke. He certainly did not have to die that night, but he got involved in something that I think he didn't know a lot about. Not that he had never tried it before, but he was not a habitual user in any sense.
I think he took more than he knew, and then by that time it was too late. It was unfortunate that you discovered that the people of the apartment just rolled him down the stairs to the garbage area like he was garbage, so that they wouldn't be held liable criminally.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know if that's the case, Spike. The stories I've heard so far that the police were actually called, and they retrieved him from the apartment. Now, have you heard otherwise?
Yeah, it was something they put him down there and his effects down there, yeah, unfortunate.
Interesting. The version of the story I've heard is that the police were called, and I've spoken with people, who were around, and they recovered his body from the apartment. But anyway, I don't want to get too far ahead, and it's very interesting that you heard that other version of the story as well. But the gas station was an interesting non-traditional venue, right? It wasn't any kind of a club or a bar that operated with a liquor license or anything like that. It was truly an underground space in this edgy but artistic neighborhood. Yeah.
Bring your own beer.
Bring your own beer. Bring your own 40 ounce.
Else you did.
Bring your own 40. So what else can we say? The Gigi was performing at that time in a band called the Murder Junkies, which had only been created in the last couple of years of Gigi's career, right? So all during the 80s, he was GG Allin and the Jabbers, and then just performing independently, playing a lot with different bands, picking up people to back him up, or recording with different existing bands that just joined with him for an individual recording session. He was really a free agent in the second half of the 80s. But after he got out of prison, which is another story, in Michigan in the early 90s, he formed a band with his brother Merle Allin and a couple other folks, and they toured quite a bit as the Murder Junkies. And in many ways, Gigi, this is some ways was the pinnacle of his public career. He was probably better known by that point than ever before. And the tours were somewhat better organized than anything he had ever done previously. And they made it out to the West Coast and up and down the Eastern Seaboard. So he had been touring for a while. I think there were something like 3 formal tours with several dates that the Murder Junkies did before the gas station show, which happened sort of at the tail end of their 3rd tour, or even you might say after the 3rd tour ended. It was almost like a one-off event maybe that happened in New York. And one of the reasons it might have happened is because Gigi's brother Merle was living in the East Village at that time. And so, he was in the area, and Gigi, who was always sort of a gypsy traveling around here and there, was in and out of New York City at that time. But the gas station show was a little bit of an anomaly from that point of view. What happened that day is very visible to people. If you want to go to YouTube or any of these places, BitChute probably, I don't know, these places with streaming services, you can see at least one videotape version of what happened that day. Somebody who was working with the Murder Junkies and who had traveled with them on their previous tour, a guy named Evan Cohen, who wrote an interesting book about being a murder junkie, roadie, road manager, whatever he was called. He videotaped the gas station show and the aftermath, but also there's another video version out there that hasn't been widely circulated. You can see the videographer in the existing footage running around as well. So there's good documentation of what happened that day, but there are mysteries and questions that I've been trying to get answered, because the guy who was videotaping the show is really there to videotape Gigi, right?
Yeah.
His job was to videotape their performance, but there was stuff going on in the club that's not as visible. And I've been lucky enough to talk to some people who saw some other things happening. So, Spike, I have a question for you. How did you get involved with the show that day? And do you remember what other bands were there?
Yeah, the show that day, we got involved because we had lived in a squat where my friends Mike and his brother Joey were involved with the band called The Denied, and they would come into my squat and do their recreational activities from their misappropriated items. They had financed their recreational activities, and they had seen me around, and they just had the show coming up, and they needed a band, and they were like, "You're always there, we hang out sometimes with Gigi, other times it's us at the spot here. So you guys want to play the show? It's real important. Let us know right away." And we had to reach out to our bandmates, out in Queens who run these who work these jobs and everything with their families, and luckily they were able to do it that day. And I'm glad Mike invited us there, but unfortunately he is deceased now, and his brother Joey is just not doing so well.
So it was Mike from The Denied who said, "Hey, you guys want to get on the bill with this GG Allin show at the gas station?"
Yeah.
Yep.
Basically him.
Very interesting. And there was another group that day called Black Rain that performed. Not really a punk group, more of like what, an industrial group, or how would you describe them?
I would say an industrial kind of techno-ish, dark sounding music, and they had all their equipment, and they weren't sharing it, and nobody would really use some of the stuff because it was synced up with drum pads and stuff to set off electronic shots. And punk rock bands, we don't really use that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, they seem like an unusual group to program with that for that gig, yeah? Or what do you say, or not?
I'm not sure how they got in. I figured maybe they were friends with Lionel. I don't think Gigi put them on.
Yeah, no, that doesn't make sense. And there are complexities to the way that show is put together. There was also a guy named Rob, who I believe was from Connecticut, but living in the East Village then. And it sounds to me like he kind of provoked the show, right? Like he was kind of the guy who got the original concept together. But it sounds like networking brought at least your band into the show, and I don't think you guys even really knew Rob. You knew Lionel, who was attached to the space.
Yeah.
Rob, though, reached out to some guys who were working over at CBGB's, like as doormen and security and stuff. And so they came in and worked the show that day. So I know that this fella, Rob, played a significant role in helping put the show together. Yeah. And again, people have pointed him out to me. He's visible in the video early on. In fact, I think it's in that footage of the sound check where that you guys participated in. Yeah. So there were different people who were obviously putting this together, and it's interesting how sort of seat of the pants on a certain on a certain level, right? True to the spirit of GG Allin, right? Very underground.
Very underground. Yeah.
And hot, you told me, and other people have told me.
In a tin can roof we were playing.
Yeah, that place must have been like a pizza oven, right? Like a cinder block, kind of a abandoned gas station.
It was terribly hot, and outside there was no shade either, so you had to go and stand on the street. And then if you're standing on the street, you're outside of the club and not a part of it. So it's kind of difficult, but people bared with it and then got inside that hot thing, and we're listening to HumYn SeWage, and later the Night, Black Rain before, and GG's really short set.
Yep. How long do you think? How long were the other bands on before the Murder Junkies took to the stage? Was it an hour? Was it longer than that?
Each band played about 40 minutes.
That long?
Yeah.
Oh, so it was like a whole afternoon.
It was a whole matinee show.
Yep.
And it ended. Yeah.
And so all three of you guys played before Gigi showed up. So that's taken up the better part of 3 hours. People just hanging out before the Murder Junkies went on. Yeah.
I would have imagined that because Gigi was there at the beginning, wanted to use our equipment for his video, and then he wandered off, and that's when I imagine he just kind of got socked out, probably drank too much, and then probably someone introduced him to some free cocaine or something to make him come back wild and crazy to perform.
That makes sense. He looks very wired when he takes the stage at that show. Like you see a lot of footage of him at different shows, and he's what I call an opportunistic drug user. What people offered him is what he took. So he looks particularly wired that day. But yeah, that's interesting to think about how much time people were hanging out, and how big was the crowd? How many people were there? Was it busy?
On that day, it did get past the usual amount of attendees, because we had seen other shows there in the past, and I guess that's how Rob decided to use this place, because they would be willing to take him. They figured it was metal, and he couldn't only hurt himself. He couldn't really punch holes in a wall there.
Right.
And
there was almost nothing to break. Although ironically, I understand that windows did get broken after Gigi's performance. There were some windows that got broken, but there was nothing in there to break. Right.
Yeah, you could just break yourself.
Exactly. And there was quite a big crowd. Yeah. So, I'll ask you another question too. The people you saw there, were they local people that were known in the local music scene, or were they from out of town? What was your observation?
All of the local people that hung out, like who were involved with the GG shoots of before, and him hanging with us in the street, they were there early, and then it filled up with more people who were a little bit further out from that kind of scene, like, because usually there was like street punks, gutter punks, squatter punks, and Gigi with his Scum Rock brand of punk had a lot of the gutter punks and the squatter punks there. And then there were the other people that were interested in, were just there because he was like a phenomenon, his poop throwing aggressive self. So I guess they came for the brand of Gigi, while we came there because we were part of that scene.
Yep. And you had actually hung out with him a little bit, like on the street before that day when he was in the East Village. Yeah.
Yeah, he'd sit out there with some Jim Beam with us while we were panhandling, and yeah, and he would asking people to go run off and go get some stuff for him sometimes, and yeah,
What was he like to hang out with for people who never had the chance to do that? Good guy or a crazy guy or?
I'd say at first he seemed okay, but then once the alcohol hit him, then he looked a little bit too crazy,
Yeah,
and like maybe you couldn't trust him.
right. That makes complete sense with what other people have told me. Yep, yep. No, I mean it does things to people. So anyway, yeah, the show sounds like it was operating as a relatively normal punk type show at that venue until Gigi got there, and then it's been a little bit of a mystery to me to figure out what happened, because if you watch the video, Gigi comes on stage, and it seems to a certain extent like a typical show of that period. You know, he roams around like a crazy man. He jumps into the audience. You know, there's no stage, right? They're just standing on the floor on the same level as the audience. He jumps out and punches somebody, gets into a couple of fist fights, but he did that all the time. And then he lies down on his back, and it's a little bit difficult to see, but I know from somebody else I talked to who was there, you know, he opened his bowels, so to speak, on the floor. And I don't know, were you there when that happened, Spike? Do you remember that happening?
And you're saying when he finally was on the floor,
Yeah, he
rolling
lay
around?
down on his back on the floor, and I think the fellow I interviewed, one other fellow I interviewed about this, said it was kind of like soft serve ice cream coming curling out of his butt onto the floor.
Yeah, sometimes when he's doing it, all I got to see was him rolling around on the floor. I didn't get to see the chocolate ice cream, soft chocolate ice cream coming out of him.
Okay.
But he did have ammunition when he got up, so that had to been the moment, because when he got up, that's when he was throwing it. I think he kind of missed with his his good shot, his good mound of it. He missed, and only a few drops got on some other people. But I guess they somehow, like my friend there, Cronus, he didn't mind, and then Gigi came up to him while he was dancing there, and my friend just keeps dancing, and while Gigi's grilling at him and giving him the mean stare, and punches my friend in the nose, of which my friend just keeps dancing, and then Gigi shoves him back, and then and I guess then he went on to somebody else.
Yep. Yep. And what did your friend think of that? Was he mad at Gigi, or do you think it was kind of fun to be in that situation?
The next day, when he resurfaced, he was like awestruck. Oh, he got hit by GG Allin. It's like a girl getting kissed by Elvis to my friend, getting punched and shoved by GG Allin.
Right. This is a point that I think, and you did a great job pointing this out. This is a point I think that people need to be aware of, right? You hear a lot about Gigi's performances, how dangerous they were, how he crossed the line, he's punching people. You hear people talk about him molesting women because he'd usually grab some girl and pull her up onto the stage. But in my experience with the people I've talked to, almost everybody wears this as a kind of badge of honor. They went there looking to see this crazy performance. They thought it would be fun. They thought it would be funny. And even people that had some physical contact with Gigi generally now say, wow, I was actually the guy that he punched, So, and, I'll put it this way too. Gigi hurt himself a lot more than he ever hurt anybody who went to one of his shows. And I have to this date never found anybody who pressed charges against Gigi for assault or anything relative to a performance. But then you look at Gigi smashing a microphone into his face. He did it so often, he broke his teeth. He's always cutting himself and bleeding. I mean, he wound up in the hospital several times with blood poisoning and other injuries. Gigi hurt himself more than other people. And most of the people, I would say, based on what I know so far, thought it was kind of a kick to be part of this crazy thing. Kind of like, that thing that happens, is it everywhere? And is it in Spain or Mexico? The running of the bulls before the bullfight, where they let the bulls run through the street. People just run out and mess with the bulls because, and every now and then someone gets killed doing it, right? But they all run out and want to be part of it because it's part of the fun.
That's like the end of the show where we were out there because it was a little cooler and the sun had the angle of it went a little away from the building, so you weren't in it, and then you weren't inside the hot thing, and we were there, and Gigi came out crazy like that bull. He was there, but nobody was home. The lights are on, but nobody's home. Kind of look in his face, and he was gonna jump at me and my friend, who was so happy to get punched in the face and shoved by him. We were standing out there watching how it all went down, and he came out towards us and just kind of like, it's us. And then somehow he it recognized in his head, and then he turned around and then proceeded to make his way down the street. But then all the Latinos who usually sell their drugs around the area were pretty upset that here's this man causing a commotion that's interrupting their flow of business, because then the city bus was there halted in the street while he stood there going,
Yep. And Gigi throws a bottle at the bus. You can see that on the video. And the cop cars appear out of nowhere in an instant. Yeah.
The thing with the cop cars is that they just kept a safe distance, and nobody got out, nobody did anything. It was I never saw that. When I was in a riot for against the police brutality, they got out. They were there to beat you up. This was a different thing where they were actually scared, and then they didn't call for backups either. They were just astounded. Like, did they report this as a mental case going to Bellevue needing EMS, or did they just let this guy wander off and pretend they didn't see nothing?
Really interesting. Yep. So the show lasted about 2 songs, I think, and then the microphone got cut off, and it was purposefully cut off, as far as I can tell, and sort of drove Gigi into a rage. The thing that I wasn't really clear about, and I'm still a little bit vague on, is why it got cut off, because nothing too bad seems to be going on based on what you can see in the existing video. But talking with a couple of guys who are working the door and working security, right? So they were really running the show, so to speak. They said that actually a kind of a mini riot had broken out in the place, or at least in the yard, etc. And there were all kinds of fights and things, and that they felt that the situation was starting to veer out of control. Now, I don't know if that's something you experienced, Spike, but from their point of view, they said they were afraid that the whole thing was about to turn into like a riot.
It seemed like it had a potential for that. However, the people were quickly made to leave. I believe Lionel or the friend Rob you were talking about, they were directing people to get out the door, since Gigi was already going that direction anyway. But he was considering to make another round in there, but there was nothing left at that time. The people were trying to scatter, and
right. Right. And usually people, after he craps on as part of the act, the smell is so bad that people oftentimes just flee the venue, never mind the fact that he's throwing it. But I've heard so many people say, oh, the stink was so bad that people just ran out of there to get away from it. So there were a combination of things that would have driven people out of that show, which happened at many shows. But also it does seem that there was something going on with a certain level of violence. I don't know if you had any experience with skinheads and whether or not they were there making any trouble. And I don't mean to say that only skinheads cause trouble, but I heard that maybe there were a group of skinheads there who might have been contributing in some way.
I did see some skinheads there also, but I believe the people around Gigi were trying to get him out of that the lights are on but nobody's home rage haze he was in, and that was Bobby Abs and then Mickey Slug, and they were directing him away. And then the skinheads, I think everybody was talking about the cops are there, because the cops actually showed up really not because of Gigi. They showed up because the people selling the drugs were throwing bottles at him and the participants of the concert, because it was interrupting their business. So the cops were investigating that, whereupon they discovered this mentally ill individual having a nervous breakdown in the street that they don't know was part of his stage show.
Right, absolutely. And you helped to elucidate something, because if you watch the video, you hear the bottles smashing, but you can't see who's throwing them. So that's interesting to see how the local drug dealing community, right, was weighing in on the event as well, so to speak. Because let's face it, I mean, they run that neighborhood, and the gas station in a way is central to the people who are there for the creative thing and the art thing and the music. But as far as the drug dealers are concerned, it's their neighborhood, right? And you guys are all visiting. You're there at their discretion, right?
Yeah, buy the drugs and go back upstairs to your apartment, or if you're from out of town, go do them somewhere else. As their mentality.
Right. So what did you do then after GG came out raging into the streets? Did you hang around or just to see what he was up to, or did you take off?
Now, I actually stood on the sidelines near the bus and watched him wander down towards Houston Street, and I figured to stay on the side of the street because they were throwing bottles to the middle of the street to try to hit the little entourage, of which even they stopped. Somebody somehow spoke Spanish to them and told them, whatever, it was a stage show, and then they were leaving. So then they migrated there, and I didn't want to go and follow for the cab ride because they were only going to go back to Bobby Ebbs's place.
And Bobby's one of these guys who was with him. If people watch the video, who's like they were like walking arm in arm for part of the video, right? He was a friend of yours from the neighborhood.
And there's only so much room in that place, and I know, that I'm just a kid that hangs out when Gigi is there drinking with us on the street. That there's only a few people are going to fit in there.
Back in Bobby's room.
Yeah.
Yep. And they're talking about, okay, Gigi keeps saying, let's just go get high. Let's get high, and anyway, for people who want to watch that video, it's interesting to see what's happening. He's trying to get a cab. I think some of the cab drivers take one look at Gigi and take off. Then they're trying to get a whole bunch of people cramming into a cab. The cab driver's like, get out of here. It's a comedy of errors watching them try to get into a cab to get out of there. Although the other irony is they could have walked to where they were trying to go. Right, Spike? It wasn't like it was that far.
Nah, it wasn't that far. I felt maybe that they were a little concerned about the cops, but then it just seemed like as if it was staged this way after a while. There's that one other element too that I'll ask you about. I know you didn't follow him, but he's clearly being followed by a bunch of people who are at the show. There are people yelling, "We love you, Gigi," and he turns around at one point and he says, "When I was at the show, you hated me. Now you won't leave me alone." It's like he's almost being persecuted by his own fans. He's trying to get away from them. You didn't follow them, so you probably weren't there, but there was that element, and it's clearly not one or two people. It's a whole group of people who seem to be tromping after him, and he's trying to flee from them. It strikes me. But it was only one block. We were already on East 2nd Street. Houston was the next block after that.
Right.
So you could see everything just standing on the street,
right,
on the sidewalk in front of the venue.
If you watch the video, they keep going around and around within a few blocks space trying to get a cab. It goes on for many minutes beyond what I think you saw until they finally manage to get in a cab. And it's like, it's like a bad dream where the same thing keeps happening over and over again, and you never get where you think you want to go. Finally they do manage to split. But it's great that you point out who some of the folks were, like Bobby, your friend Slug. These are the guys who are pretty much with Gigi. And then there's this other group that's following him like half a block behind him that keeps yelling stuff at him. And I also heard from other people that they were damaging businesses. They were turning over trash cans and doing stuff like that in the neighborhood that was causing trouble as well.
Yeah.
So it was a particularly crazy show in a lot of ways. Maybe the fact that it was 1,000,000 degrees out, maybe the fact that it was on the Lower East Side, which in its own way is kind of a boiler, right? Like you've got the drug scene there, and you've got this kind of decaying neighborhood. Maybe that contributed to it. Gigi seemed to be particularly wired going on stage for that show. I would say he had all kinds of stuff in his system, which might have contributed to
a lot of stuff. Yeah,
contributed to his death later, right?
The crazy look was drug inspired.
Absolutely. Definitely. And the overdose later seems certainly to have been caused by heroin use, but he had all kinds of a cocktail of stuff in his system, which must have contributed to his condition when he was using the heroin later. And so the show, really got out of control, I feel, in a way that exceeded in some ways what you see in the videos, and there are so many of them, of a lot of the other shows. but I think a number of conditions contributed to that. And then, you know, his death later that night is not unrelated in many ways to how crazy things were that afternoon. But also, it seems to me it was just an isolated and very unfortunate accident. You know, he wasn't a habitual drug user, I've been told by many people. And he probably just got into a place where he was too far gone, and the people he was with, some of whom I've been able to talk to, just weren't aware of the fact that he was drifting away, you know, and he died in the very early hours of the morning before anybody realized that he was in any kind of distress. And that was it. The gas station was the last show that he ever did. And the next day, I wonder if you recall, Spike, it seems like word went around that Gigi was dead. Yeah.
Yeah, it was my friend that got the poop and shoved and punched by him, Cronus. He was pretty sad. He finally got punched by GG Allin and got to dance in front of him and poop on himself, and he was just pretty depressed.
Yeah.
And it was in the New York Post, so I saw that and I'm like, wow, this event that was just supposed to be one show now is you know, now it became historical.
It did.
Punk rocker found dead in East Village.
Yep, it absolutely did.
Yeah, he's a deceased. But we still have the records to listen to.
And the legend lives on, right?
That is correct.
The legend lives on, and if Gigi wanted anything, if you want my unsolicited opinion of what motivated him, if he wanted anything, he wanted to be famous. He wanted to be that famous guy, GG Allin. Yeah, there was an edge to it, right? That was part of what I think he thought he had to offer people. But he wanted to be famous, and he certainly is. He's probably better known now than he was at the time, quite frankly. So he accomplished something at the very least.
Yeah, well, rest in peace.
Rest in peace,
GG
GG
Allin. Okay, Mike, thank you for being on the Punk Rock and Beyond show.
It was a pleasure. I've been talking to so many people for this book, and they've been so generous about sharing stories and impressions with me that it's fun to just put a little bit of it out there. And it was great to talk with you and get firsthand stories and impressions. You really lived that day, and it's terrific that we're getting a sense of what it was actually like.
Right.
You'll never be better.
Tune in every Monday, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, whatever, 68radio.net. Spike Polite.